Egbanado, kere ye un nado, agolorisha. Egbanado, kere ye
Hello, everyone. Welcome to What Magic Is This, a podcast about magic, the occult, the esoteric, the paranormal, the supernatural, and the weird. My name is Douglas Batchelor, and we have a fantastic show for everybody today. Now, for those who do not know, I have a Patreon, and on my Patreon, a lot of my supporters there, they get to vote on what is going to be on this podcast. And a couple of times I put up certain topics, and they don't get voted on for one or two polls. But today's topic was finally voted in, and that topic was Santería, Lucumi. And for this one, I have to admit, it's not too much in my wheelhouse. I know very little about it, but I know somebody was making a bit of noise while these topics were in the Patreon poll, and he was like, I really want to talk about this. And so I reached out to a former guest of mine and translator of the 3 books of the occult philosophy by Agrippa, Eric Purdue. And I said, Eric, where is the place to go for Lucumi Santería? And Eric said, well, with me, of course. But he said that he wanted to bring on a friend. And I'm going to ask you, Eric, first of all, welcome back to What Magic Is This?
Thank you.
And what is your relationship to Lucumi Santería? And who is this friend that you wanted to bring on the show?
I just met him like 5 minutes ago.
Oh, okay. I see.
Well, I'll start with my friend. So his name is Stephen Cherena, and Stephen is a priest in the religion. We've been initiated almost the same amount of time, I think.
Mm-hmm. More or less, yeah.
Like 75 years or something.
Wow, long time.
And we've done a lot of work together, and Stephen is married to my godmother, so there's definitely a connection there as well. And I think speaking about this religion, I feel much better having him here because Stephen has years of experience and he's working this very heavily.
Amazing.
So,
Stephen, I'm going to pitch the very first question to you, and it's a big question. What is Santería Lucumi?
Sure. So first off, it's important that we realize that this is a practice that's always evolving. The term Santería is something that was used to mask the African twist to all of this, which is really the foundation of it. So the slaves, even after slavery, we have to remember that our deities had to be hidden. And the way that we hid them was that we hid our deities inside of statues of saints. So the term Santería actually means those who make saints or those who work with saints. And we do that, or we used to have to do that in regards to that term when we had to hide from this. As time evolved, people started working more with a Lucumí or Lucumi, the term, which really, it means brother, fellow brothers. And that is something that was really important to the Yoruba when they first got here, because the reality of all of this is that all of these different deities that we practice here in the Americas were deities of different communities in Africa. So as they came here to the New World, we had to work together. There weren't priesthoods that were big enough to preserve Oyo's priesthood versus Ife's priesthood versus Ogun State's priesthood. So what began happening was that brothers, sisters, families, and communities that knew that they were Yoruba had to begin working together. And that's where the term Lucumi or Alukumi comes from, fellow brothers and sisters. I think now in this particular day and age, there's so many people working Ifa, and there are so many people working Cariocha, which are two different branches of this practice, that those are probably the two different preferred terms that we prefer nowadays. You know, are you a priest of the Orisha practice, or are you a priest of Ifa? You know, and then we get all up into Africa versus the New World or the Caribbean or Afro-Cuban Lucumi, so to speak.
It has evolved so that, you know, a lot of us really aren't using the saints as much as some people on the internet say. You know, in the Ocha room, there are no saints. You know, we don't do any Catholic prayers or no saint statues or anything like that. And so this is, over the years, you know, probably over the last 50 years, I guess, maybe, it's evolved to be, you know, much more Afrocentric, I think, than it used to be. But, you know, Catholicism is part of culture. And that's always going to be there with some people. And it's fine.
So for the folks listening, we're basically talking about a religion here, are we not, gentlemen? Like, this is a spirituality. What are the biggest influences? You mentioned Catholicism, but and also Stephen touched on African religions. So are those the two biggest parts to Santeria Lucumi, or is there some other things that are influencing it as well?
I guess you could add some native influence too, right, Stephen? In Cuba?
Yeah. You know, as the Yoruba came here, we're talking specifically about the Yoruba because the Orisha rites or the Lucumi rites or the Santería came from specifically the Yoruba people. And these people are very well respected and very well known for their structure, their cultural structure, their hierarchy. So as they came here, they had no problem in arranging how the Orisha practice would work here. So for the most part, most of it, I would say, is African. I think that most of what is influenced in regards to Catholicism just has to do with a lot of masking.
Okay.
There are a couple of ceremonies here and there that certain lineages do. Like, for example, just as you go receive your blessings at a cemetery or at a bank or at a hospital and so forth, some people may go to the church as well, you know, or to drop stuff off to clean themselves and so forth. So they respect those aspects. Most lineages of Lucumi also have this whole aspect of spiritism through Catholicism, you know. A lot of, unfortunately, how should I say, the numbers of priests that knew how to work what we call a gungun, the ancestral priesthoods of the Yoruba, didn't come in big enough numbers for the Egungun practice, for the Egungun rites and the Egungun brotherhood to live here. So instead here, spiritism covered most of the stuff that we would cover through Egungun rites.
And culturally too, there's also, I mean, I mentioned earlier, there was some native influence, especially I think in regards to plants in Cuba. Mm-hmm. But even within Africa, it isn't all Yoruban. There's also Dahomian, particularly the Dahomian people. But there's some rites that we have that are definitely associated with that, and they're a little bit different. But we've kind of lumped them together with Orisha in practice. So there was a lot of that as well.
Yeah, a lot of Congolese. And a lot of Karawali. Yeah, but those people came in large enough numbers that they were able to have their own branches and their own practices.
So is that in a nutshell, the history of Lucumi Santeria? Is that it basically was having to, as Stephen say, mask up the traditional Yoruba religions? Was it to keep it from the masters who were keeping the slaves so that it would appear as though they are converted to this new religion, but in a way they're just keeping the old ways? What's the best way of looking at the history of Lucumi Santeria?
Something that's important is it's really important to understand that different places that were conquered, even one island to another, and I say this from the perspective as a Puerto Rican, I'm not Cuban, And the way that stuff was preserved in my country was very different, the way it was preserved and the way it was worked in Cuba.
Okay.
So Cuba is very well known for what they call cabildos, which were centers where people were able to practice whatever they wanted to practice as long as the slave owner, when the slave owner went in, the fundamentals of everything that they were doing was Catholic.
Got it.
You know? So again, they're carrying around this big statue of the Virgin Caridad del Cobre. Her characteristics, and she covers a lot of energy having to do with Oshun. So inside of this statue that we're carrying around is Oshun's secrets. We're singing, we're praising Oshun. The slave owner comes, sees what's going on, and he's like, okay, they're fine. They're doing whatever they're doing. They're hunga bunga stuff. And there's Caridad del Cobre, you know?
Right.
So.
And also the when you talk about conversions too, Christianity was also already known in West Africa. So it wasn't like when the slaves were taken to Cuba that it was a completely new experience. I mean, they were definitely forced
right
into it, but they weren't really strangers to it either. And also, but I think also like one of the major features of Lucumi is the way it was reformulated, which was necessary too, because as Stephen was saying, they had people, because in Africa it was almost like little city states.
Okay.
So each city had its own practices, and in some cases deities that presided over it. And so when they were all brought together in Cuba, they had to make a system that worked with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the unique features, I think, with Santería Lucumi, is that sort of cohesion that was created.
I don't know if this enters into it, and both of you can correct me if I'm wrong. When a lot of the slaves were brought over, weren't they trying to keep people distanced from knowing one another? If somebody was taken from a certain part of Africa, they would try to mix them up as much as possible. But one of the only ways that they were able to connect with one another was through something like Yoruba religions and whatnot. Is that an okay thing to say, or is it off base?
No, it's correct. It's very correct. I think that we have to remember, we definitely have to understand that as people of color, as Latinos, culturally, because still that psychological mind state, that internalized racism, where they separate people in shades as slave owners. There were many different aspects that they did to make sure that one would be kept against another. It's very common, that you kind of look at what people consider the hierarchy of some of these practices. Again, the Yoruba, even till this very day, are very, very organized and structured compared to, say, for example, bringing a bunch of Congolese slaves. The Congo is so humongous that it's not like the Yoruba where, you know what I'm saying? One community is not that far from another community and they can somehow be on the same page. The two primary branches of the Congo, which are Briyumba and Mayombe, have always been like this against each other, And some people may say, yeah, well, that's because, they're two totally different ways, blah, blah, blah. But I think really that has way more to do with, again, how you're saying, the design. Do whatever you need to do to make sure that there is no unity and nothing that will turn these people against me collectively, And
a lot of this was preserved through not just stories, but also songs and prayers and things like that. And that, to me, that's always been a really nice defining feature of Lucumi, is the way that songs are preserved, and prayers. That hasn't always happened globally,
right?
And a lot of Western practices that's a piece that's missing. I always like that about Lucumi, that I think that was sort of like the vehicle for a lot of the preservation, was that, as Stephen said, the structure, but also the songs and the prayers.
For sure. Let's talk about a bit of the beliefs of Lucumi Santeria. And so as a starting point, maybe not the best starting point, but I'm gonna go with it anyways. And hopefully the next series of questions will unspool from it. But and please forgive my pronunciation of any of this. But what is Ache?
So Ache is
Ache.
I often that's fine. Just don't pronounce it like ache.
No.
I usually think of it as sort of like a divine power or divine link.
Okay.
That the purpose of ceremony of offerings, initiations, and things like that is to strengthen that. And it allows you to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish and what you need to accomplish. And Ashe is something that we all have. But you can also squander it by not listening to advice. And so sometimes that can be, kind of not really damaged, but you can sort of not be as effective as you want to be. But ultimately, I look at it as sort of divine power, if you want to retranslate it.
Okay. And is the first figure that I like to talk about within Lucumi Santeria, Olodumare, are they kind of considered the first manifestation of Ashe?
When I think of Ashe, I think about a process.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I think of a process where there is a process that begins with consciousness, Ejiobe, the spark of light in Ashe Dudu, in this dark matter. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
That begins to take shape and gives shape to what we call Olodumare. So Olodumare being that process of from darkness now there is light, So Olodumare, Olo, a keeper of something, a king, one who has control over things. Odu, Odu is all of the different aspects of Ashe that give shape and birth to something. So Odu are all the different shapes and all the different shades of color that give form to what eventually becomes matter or vibration. So Olo, Odu, and then Omare, Oshumare, all of these things have to do with the rainbow or have to do with the paradigm from blackness all the way to the brightest light of whiteness, and in between there, we have the rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, but something that begins in this state of dudu, blackness, all the way to fum fum, a bright white light. Olodumare.
Olodumare, is that almost in a way considered, it's not a direct correlation, but is it kind of considered the highest deity within Lucumi Santeria?
For the most part, yeah. It's just that there's people out there that want a source. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So some people start with Olodumare. For the most part, most people, when they think of Olodumare, they think of the source,
Got it.
But I always go back to this source of darkness, this undifferentiated, neutral energy that's waiting to be given a shape or a form or vibration.
For sure.
And that comes before Olodumare.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, because it's not really, people sometimes look at Olodumare as God.
Right.
But there's almost like this aspect of what was there before Olodumare. That's what's interesting about it, because it's not really the source. It's, as Stephen was saying, people are looking for a source, and strictly, I don't really see Olodumare as a source. He's sort of like the initial manifestation of being.
Okay.
And the distributor of Ashe.
Distributor, right.
Some people would say that it's Olodumare is in some way a trinity. Can one of you expand on this a little bit, or is that kind of like not the best way of looking at it?
It's popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you have Olodumare, Olofi, and Olorun, and we don't really directly interact with them.
Okay.
That's the thing too. We don't become initiated to them, and we don't really receive them. There are a few ceremonies that we do to them in very specific circumstances. So it's not completely absent, but it's more of I think it's something we're indirectly interacting with, definitely not directly.
No.
Yeah. But the Trinity, I think that really it's a Trinity, but it is sort of like in Christianity, they're actually one.
Got it.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. The trilogy, I think is, again, it's just the easiest way to relate everything to the creative process that comes from Christianity. I don't come from a Christian family. I don't come from anything having to do with it, Catholicism. So for me, all of that stuff really confuses me. Even though I do practice the rites of the Lucumi, for me, I just have questions when it comes down to those kind of things. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I do understand. I from the outside looking in, I kind of understand why you would call it the trilogy and how, everybody in the Lucumi practice, for the most part, they'll start with a moyuba or a praise to Olofi, Olorum, and Olodumare, which is fine, But when I moyuba, I go way further back than that, and I don't go in that particular order. So, and if anybody asks, I just explain to them, the logic behind everything that's in between all of those things.
So even people who have not even a familiar knowledge of Santeria Lucumi, they will know of this word, which is Orisha. So are both of you able to give a kind of how you understand Orisha and how best to share the idea of Orisha to somebody who's never heard of it before?
I feel like Steven's more eloquent than I am.
I'll just piggyback.
We're going to piggyback. Okay. So Orishas are manifestations of the source. Often people will say they're forces of nature. To me, they do much more than that, and they're not limited to, I guess, the divisions that people often give them.
Okay.
But if you're to make sort of a comparison to other religions, you could say that they're basically kind of like deities, and we sort of treat them that way. We have initiations to them. We have ceremonies. Those are the beings that we interact with the most, them and ancestral rites as well.
Okay.
So anyway, there are billions of Orishas.
Billions?
Not billions. There are tens of Orishas. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Got to get them all.
Again, because this is one of those things where people want to try and find a way to relate. Are they personifications of aspects of what we're going to call quote unquote nature?
Yeah.
Do they have a specific description, a way of looking? Are they yeah.
So Sha means selected,
okay.
Right? Ori, a lot of people limit Ori to heads, but really Ori is bigger than heads. Ori is more consciousness.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has their own state of consciousness, their own way that they came here, their own aspect of reflecting the infinite here upon Onilera, upon the earth. Orisha, these selected states of consciousness are collective energy that people work in that kind of way. So we have aspects that have to do with water. We have aspects that have to do with fire. We have aspects that have to do with the earth and so forth. I think that, again, we have to remember, even though, we're here talking about Lucumi, that it's important to understand that Orishas came from communities, right? So here, Shango, for example, to us, we classify Shango more with fire, lightning, thunder, and so forth. All these different things that Shango has more characteristics of here. But if we go to Oyo State, I've been there in Nigeria, it is different. You know what I'm saying? And Shango covers way more than just what we're used to. And every Orisha in different communities has its own collective way of taking care of that community, you know? And back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for a whole family to be initiated under the same Orisha, the collective communal Orisha. Whereas for us, we have enough Orisha to choose from that we ask what Orisha would be best for this person to be initiated into. You know, what state of consciousness in nature would be best for this person to receive the mysteries of. There's also what are called irumole. A lot of Lucumi may not know about this, but these are aspects of Orisha that came supposedly manifesting themselves, right? So they don't really understand the difference between those who are states of consciousness, you know what I'm saying? Things that we believe and things that manifest themselves through possession or through nature. There's this whole other aspect of certain powers that communal families had, for example, that gave them the ashe and the authority to be priests and to be well respected as messengers of Shango, for example. Sacred families chosen.
The other thing too is that everyone's relationship is different. So Stephen touched on how in Africa, each community would have a certain relationship with that Orisha, and the Orisha may do more than what we might say in Lucumi they would do. But that happens on an individual basis all the time. My relationship with Shango might be very different than Stephen's.
Got it.
And, you know, I might be able to get away with ways of working with Shango that other people may not. And vice versa. There could be something else that they have as well. It's a certain ashe that you have. And certain Orishas just have this really individual way of acting with people. Some, you may have 20 Orishas in your house, and some of them you may have a very special relationship with, and others you may not. You know,
so sorry to completely jump in here. When you say house, Eric, what are you talking about there?
Well, in that particular instance, I meant my actual literal home.
Oh, your actual middle home. Okay.
Yeah. But yes, that's a big word.
It is a big word. So the Orisha, just so people can get a bit of clarity here, as I just mentioned, Olodumare, not really for practitioners of Lucumi Santería, kind of petition, they're not really worked with. It's the Orisha that are the ones that people gravitate towards. Each person, when they get initiated, and again, if this is not correct, when people are initiated into Lucumi Santería, they are given almost like a set of, or directed towards a set of Orisha that are very important to each person. Is this correct?
It's usually the same set, though. You start out with, there's a starter set.
Okay, let's hear the starter set. I'd love to hear both of your interpretation of the starter set of Orisha.
So, I mean, this is initiation specific because there are other things that people do before they're initiated.
Okay.
And you don't have to be initiated to be in this religion either. Okay. So we're sort of like, I think maybe jumping ahead a little bit.
Okay.
But so by the time you're initiated, you would have a set of warriors.
Okay.
As we call them, which are Elegua, Ogun, Ochosi, and Osun. And so when you're initiated, you would employ that Elegua that you have in theory.
Okay.
There could be exceptions to all this.
All right.
And so you have that, then you have Obatala, Shango, Oshun, and Yemaya. And depending on which Orisha you're being initiated to, you may have an extra one.
Okay.
And that can also change depending on situations. And in some other cases, you may even get more than that. But everybody has those, the Elegua, Ochosi, Oshun, Shango, and Yemaya. That's the same across the board.
Again, it's important to understand that depending on how you're coming into a house, now things are different than they used to be, especially in Lucumi rites, where there were very few what we call babalawo, or those high priests of Ifa, philosophers, and those who knew the oracle in depth. There were very few. And so we, at one point in time, it took a specific elder, specific person that knew a good babalawo to take you to one. That babalawo wouldn't even look in your direction unless if you came with an elder to represent you. And that Awo Ifa or that Babalawo had his own way of giving you things that you may need as well. But regardless, usually step one was always you being under somebody that was going to take care of you and take responsibility for you, you know? So before you have these warriors, you had to have somebody that was willing to take you under them, you know? Elekes or beads of light that you would receive.
Beads of light. So is that, I know, again, if I'm completely off base, that there's a necklace that is involved with being initiated to Santería Lucumi, or is this completely different?
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to about initiation. That's almost like starting with third base.
Right.
So usually what happens is you meet someone who is a priest in the religion.
Okay.
And you develop a relationship with them. And if you feel like it's compatible, then you kind of do a formal ceremony to be under their wing. And that's the Eleke or necklace ceremony.
Got it.
And all houses give you the four basic necklaces, Obatala, Shango, Yamaya, Oshun, and then most give you a fifth one too, which is Elegua.
Okay.
Some don't do that, but most do. So most houses give you 5. That does not make you a priest.
Okay.
That identifies you as part of a lineage. It puts you under the wing of a teacher. There are many things that you can do. I mean, you can, through the guidance of that teacher, there's a lot that you can do with just having necklaces. So that's not really. I think that's underestimated by many people. I have seen, miraculous things happen to people just by getting necklaces, and sometimes they never get initiated, and that's all they ever needed.
Oh.
And if they need to go further and they someday need to be initiated, and that's something they can do. I'm not a believer that's for everybody. And I don't even necessarily believe, I also don't believe that makes you a better person or more serious practitioner even. That's just a gift that some people are given, and that's that, But usually in the religion, you receive your beads, and they're each a specific color combination.
Okay. So
you know who they are. I think you could sort of think of them as being almost talismanic in some way because they have some of the ashe of those orishas.
Okay.
So they do carry some of the power of those orishas. It's not the same as actually having your orisha, receiving them later on.
Got it.
But you do receive benefit from it.
And again, it's better to classify. To clarify now, we're assuming that you're doing your Babalao stuff. If your house works 3-5, that whole aspect of ceremonies and stuff would be done with the Babalao. That has nothing to do with things that we do as Orisha or practitioners of this specific lineage of Orisha that you receive. This is where it splits. I just wanted to clarify with you.
For sure. You've used the term Babalao quite often. Are you able to define what a Babalao is?
Babalao literally means a father of secrets, and some people take that as a father of the secrets of the powers of these rites. But really, it's a little bit more literal than that. Okay. People do not know this, but it has more to do with if people come to you sharing their secrets and their problems, what gives you more share, what enhances your power is to learn to be quiet, to learn to retain people's secrets, and to learn to help them with remedy. That's really what the Awo Ifa is supposed to be doing. And he's supposed to be seeking remedy through the oracle of Ifa. It's the same deity that we're trying to reach through the Orisha practice.
Okay.
Except that Odu can be reached directly through possession, where you can speak a person's presence, a person's remedy, a person's future. The Awo Ifa, the Babalao, uses a specific oracle to do that.
Okay.
Very
cool. So the Orisha, they are about as central as you can get to the practices of Lucumi Santería, are they not? Like they are central. There might be this Olodumare, but it's really with the Orishas that most people that are initiated, or even those who are not, they concentrate more on. I always hate using the term work, but I'll use it here. It's through work with the Orisha that most of what we would consider Lucumi Santeria comes from. Is that correct, Eric, or is that too much of an oversimplification?
Yeah, it's correct, but I would also add ancestors.
Okay.
And that is also something that should not be minimized. And I've been part of 2 houses in my life, and both houses felt the same way, that you start with ancestors.
Okay.
And I don't think Stephen will disagree with me there.
Yeah, it's super important. We start everything with the ancestors. I mean, if a person is having issues with the ancestors, we don't progress until we figure things out with that. Also, there's times when we're in Orisha ceremony, and the Orisha will be like, boom, I don't even want to talk to you right now. And under certain letters that fall through divination, then the first thing we would ask is, does this have to do with Egu? A lot of times, yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You forgot to stand in front of us. You forgot to acknowledge us. You forgot to make sure that we were in alignment with what you're doing today, you know? And I've seen it quite a few times when people try to jump straight to ceremony and they forget to get the green light from this person's blood lineage all the way back to creation, Egu, you know?
And there's a saying, Ikulu Biocha, which is, the dead come before the Orisha.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And when we do a lot of ceremonies, we work with the ancestors first, because as Stephen was saying, if the ancestors are not in order, the Orisha won't do anything.
Right.
I mean, they don't need us. So.
And all of this has to do with creative energy. So the further you go back, the Orisha or nature itself had a role to play in our genetics, literally going back to creation. So
I want to stay on this. And this was a question that I had a little bit further on. I do notes for each time I do a show, but I want to hang with the ancestors for a little bit. So when you say something's not right with the ancestors, what does one do to help with some kind of remediation or to help with fix things to make them right with the ancestors? How does Santeria Lucumi do this?
Divination, right? I mean, we have to figure out what they need.
Got it.
And that can run, the gamut of something as simple as lighting a candle to something much more complicated. So,
yeah, we have to remember that most of us that work these rites are mediums in one way or another. So usually off the bat, a whole bunch of people will agree as to what the problem is. We throw coconut, or we divine, and we realize, yeah, that's the problem. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Your brother that passed away when you were 2 years old, or your twin, has a big role to play with what's going on. We need to prepare something for that particular spirit, depending on this person's issues. Some things we have to do before we move forward, and other things it's just more about do not ever forget. As you move forward in this practice, this is an aspect that you have to remember. But as Eric said, a lot of times it's just that you didn't take it serious when we opened up the day. Because usually early in the morning, if we're going to do a ceremony, the first thing that we're doing is acknowledging Egu, or our ancestors. And if it's just another number, if you're trying to jump over that to get it over with so that you can get the ceremony going, sometimes the ancestors will stop you and be like, oh, you think I'm a joke? Or, oh, okay. And that's when, they can take all day answering that they are finally satisfied and go ahead and move on.
But we try to be careful to not let it get to the point.
I hear you.
Nor open up a can of worms that is unnecessary. Start with the basics and work your way up.
I love it. That's fantastic. Maybe with this, it might take a bit of a personal story from you, Eric, but how does one start with Lucumi? I know it's not just like, say, walking into the nearest church with, say, something like Christianity, but is there a process? Is there a hierarchy? But particularly for you, Eric, how does somebody in Seattle Start with Lucumi.
Seattle is a desert.
It's a very wet desert. But
Yes. It was by pure chance that I met up with Stephen and my godmother.
Okay.
Here in Seattle, because that shouldn't have happened.
No. Okay.
There aren't many people here, but I look at it like dating. And, how do you find that person? I mean, sometimes it's online. Sometimes it's walking into the right botanica and the right people are there. Sometimes it's someone that, someone knows somebody.
Okay.
But getting into it really just comes down to meeting someone who's knowledgeable and you can trust.
Okay.
And by knowledgeable, I mean not someone who has all the answers, but someone who can help you find the answers. Because that person doesn't have to know everything. That person doesn't exist anyway. But I think dating is a good analogy with this, because it really comes down to developing a relationship. And every relationship's a little different, and every godparent's different and all that. So it just comes down to comfort level, and if you trust that person and they can help you,
right,
help you progress.
Okay.
No ulterior motives or anything like that.
Stephen, what is this concept of godmother, godfather within Santería Lucumi?
Well, in this practice, really, it's all about genetics.
Okay.
Everything is about genetics here. So even when we moyuba, when we pay homage, when we open something up, the first thing that is the most important thing is, can you trace what you're doing back to at least Africa? So yeah, if people don't understand that first aspect, you're skipping over something humongous. Like, it's the most important thing when somebody comes to me with a problem and says, I was with somebody and things didn't work out or whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I'll ask them, who was it? Who were their godparents? Until I figure out something about, okay, I know who you are and where you come from. Because like we say in our rites, tell me where you come from and I know where you're going, So that's super important. Your original godparent is really the lineage that you come from. Even though there is the ayubona or the assistant or the other godparent that is really the one that does all the work, you know what I mean? But the Orisha that's going on your head is actually the genetics of this particular person and where they come from. So for us, it's really important. It's really, unfortunately, we come from, Eric and I specifically, we come from elders where you did not have the choices that you have nowadays. You know what I'm saying? Where there's the internet, where you can pick and choose, where you can pull out money and buy your way into things. Like, it really has evolved. Some things for the better, some things for the way worse in regards to, again, we come from elders that are like, you're chosen, or you need this initiation, or I'll let you know when it's time. And when it's time to do things with these elders, it really was about jumping blindly into this tunnel of who knows where the hell it led to, and trusting this elder, trusting this person with everything that they were going to do with you, and that things would be better. You'd find remedy and growth.
And that's the thing. It is, they say godparent, and it really is a parent.
Okay.
And, you can leave that godparent. That godparent can pass away. You can hate each other. You can love each other, but they don't go away. And, my godfather who initiated me passed away. He's still my godfather. And it's indelible.
Okay.
So it's a relationship you have to take very seriously. And as Stephen was saying, I mean, yeah, there were less choices when we started. And personally, I've always had dumb luck finding the right person.
Good.
I wasn't even looking for it. So
Amazing. I have to ask you this, gentlemen. It sounds like there's some kind of a hierarchy within Lucumi Santeria. So is it like one of those things where, and this ties into kind of like this next question, but is there some kind of like an orthodoxy, or is it going more to what Stephen said, like several points where it's just like, this changes from place to place, but is there usually like some kind of like I'm going to say like a really broad kind of orthodoxy and hierarchy to Lucumi Santeria?
I think probably the most important to understand is that once you're under somebody,
Mhm.
you have a godparent. Again, I'm talking about Lucumi and I'm talking about Kariocha, or a lineage of a particular Orisha. I want you to understand that, right? So the difference is that you receive things from a Babalao, that Babalao is your Babalao. He gives you something, but things that Babalaos give you are for you.
Right.
Right? They're not things that, unlike in Ocha, when you receive an Orisha, that Orisha can give birth to another Orisha, to another Orisha, to another Orisha. So for us, we're coming from this genetic lineage. You know what I'm saying? What's important to understand is that once you are under this person, I would say even before Kariocha to your head, because sometimes, if you want to deal with people that are very honest with you, it doesn't necessarily, me being your godfather doesn't necessarily mean that your next step, so to speak, is to receive Ocha in your head.
Okay.
I'm a person that embraces and respects a bunch of other branches to this practice. So some people may need Osai because they are naturally herbalist. They know the magic of the woods and of nature. You may have a gift, a philosophy of memory of this and of that. I may refer you to Ifa, to an Awo. You may have aspects that have to do with remedy and sickness. You may need specific help. I may point you in the direction of the Arara, the Dahome, and the Mudum rites and say, you know what? Go ask about Babaluaye. Go ask about this deity that's specifically there to bring you remedy and so forth. So I'm saying that just to say that, yeah, you can go through me as a godfather and I can crown you. And then from there, we can see what the next step is. But there's also a whole bunch of aspects that once you have Eneke on your head and somebody is in charge of you, they may point you directly to the drum. They may point you directly to Ifa. They may point you directly to Osang and so forth.
As far as like hierarchy, I mean, the only real hierarchy, I mean, I don't put a huge amount of stock in hierarchy, but I think the only hierarchy that might exist is the number of years initiated you are. But to me, I don't think Stephen will disagree with this, is that's only important ceremonially.
Okay.
I really don't make too big of a deal if someone's been initiated longer than I have if they have nothing to give.
Right.
But I can respect what they've given.
Got it.
Too at the same time. It's a dual thing. But there's no high priest.
Okay.
In this religion. Your high priest is your godparent.
Okay.
Really? That's where everything is coming from for you. And so it kind of works up that way through that tree. And you do have a lineage. And Stephen and I come from different lineages, but we also have a lot of crossover at the same time. So it's very interesting that there's different trees, but they cross. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think again, there's not necessarily a hierarchy. I think that it's more about everybody has their place,
Mm-hmm.
And I only know this. This is really changing right now, literally on a daily basis, where there are certain titles that really do think that with this title, I have authority to all these different things. But the reality of it is that there's no way. There's too much to master as a godparent. There's too much to master as an Oriate. There's too much to master as a real Awoifa, because in all of those aspects, there are tons of things that you have to master just to have that title. But then you also have to master which aspect of that particular branch of the priesthood are you going to be a master at, So for example, if I go into the music, Am I going to be an akpong? Am I going to learn the secrets of the songs and invocation? Or am I going to be a drummer that is going to manipulate anya and the drum to contract and release sachet? Or am I going to be a dancer, one who is going to move and learn the channeling process to bring Orisha directly here to participate with us? And that's just the musical aspect. Imagine Osai in the woods, where some people master the animals, other people master remedy as far as real medicine, other people master magic in regards to medicine, totally different branches within those branches.
Food and cooking, that's a whole
that too as well.
That's a whole separate thing.
Wonderful. So as far as Lucumi Santeria, there's no Bible, there's no 10 Commandments. It's nothing close.
But I think when you talk about Orthodoxy, I think where it gets difficult is, no, we don't have a Bible. I think the closest would be, Odu, which is the signs, but I think some people get into trouble because there's technically no right and wrong to some extent, but there is like an objective wrong.
Okay.
There are certain things. So each lineage does things a little bit differently.
Got it.
But you can tell if it's legit.
Got it.
It's hard to explain if you're not in it.
Right.
But if someone's just pulling something out of left field somewhere, you can tell. And some people do some crazy stuff, but the legitimate lineages, they know what to do, and there's going to be differences. Stephen and I, like I said, we come from different lineages, and there are some minor differences in the way we do things.
Okay.
But you can tell if it's right.
Can we focus on a few aspects of some of the main rituals of Lucumi Santeria? So we touched on it a little bit, initiation. And again, if either of you feel like you can't talk about certain things, please do not talk about certain things. I know that that's what keeps these traditions alive. The initiation process, can either of you take me through a little bit more about what it is? Again, we talked about how each person's kind of given like a starter set. Is there anything else that you'd like the listeners of this episode to know about initial initiation within Lucumi Santeria?
Probably the most important thing, again, a lot of people come in through elekes or your originally your seeds of light that give you access to this particular set of genetics or this particular set of a lineage. Really, the first thing that elder should do is they should do egging rites. There's things that you should receive and things that you should do in regards to your ancestors. Some houses that work through Ifa will take you to an Awo Ifa, and the Awo will prepare you tools for you to work with your ancestors. If not, your lineage should have its own way of helping you access your ancestors. This is Lucumi. This is pure Lucumi that I'm talking. A lot of Lucumi, or most of Lucumi, I should say, practices spiritism, mediumship, that's very important to a lot of houses because a lot of people come to this practice really needing remedy. They have major problems. And so we do everything that we can to align this person with their guides, Now, yes, a lot of your guides may include family and ancestors, but some people have ancestors that have major issues. And those are not necessarily spirits and energy that you want to be working with as your guides or people that you want to be giving too much light to, so to speak. So there's that really big separation, spiritism versus egging. But pure Lucumi, you're paying homage to your ancestors. And that's the first thing that I do with my god kids. They receive a stick, and that stick is used to pound the earth to invoke their ancestors. And there's things to learn, your lineage, study, get up in there, ask your elders, go to Google, figure out who are your elders. And then from there, your lineage of Ocha, your Orisha lineage, and learning that, and then from there, warriors, if the person is wanting to move forward, warriors are these 4 deities that Eric spoke about earlier that have to do with protection. Not only to protect your home and to protect your head, to protect your family, but also these are the three first Orisha that you receive. So a lot of godparents don't know this, but this is where you really need to start watching this person to make sure that if they have a path in becoming an old Orisha or a priest of an Orisha, that they know and they learn how to take care of these 3 Orisha before you go giving them anything else.
Initiation, it's a long process. And before you're initiated, you have to find out which Orisha you're going to be initiated to.
Okay.
And that needs to be done by a qualified, person who can do readings. And it's not always your godparent. If your godparent knows how to do it, that's great.
When you say readings, that's a form of divination, is it not?
Right. Dilagoon.
Okay.
Which are shells.
Okay.
That's one, or Ifa, that's the other method. There's 2 official methods.
Okay. We'll touch on those in a sec, for sure.
Yeah. One set of Orishas, and you should really only be finding this out if you plan on being initiated, because some people want to find out, they get their necklaces and they want to find out who their Orisha is. And you can do that, but it won't really do you much good. You can't do anything with that information.
Okay.
It's not like your sun sign.
Okay.
Or anything like that. But once you identify the Orisha, then you can start preparing for the ceremony. And it takes a while. What the public sees is a ceremony. Ceremony takes about 7 days, or takes 7 days. There is a period of about a year after that where that initiate has to be very careful with certain things. That's to protect them and to protect the ashe and the things they've been given.
Can you give me an example, Eric, of what this might be? Only if you can.
Yeah, I mean, so some well-known ones are things like you have to wear white for a year.
Okay.
You shouldn't be going out, especially at night. You can go to the grocery store and things that are required to live. You can go to work,
right?
But you shouldn't be going to restaurants and bars and things like that.
Okay.
But it's really to protect you. Once a year is up, then things are pretty much back to normal. But once you complete that, you're a priest. There's other things that are usually done after that, which I won't get into. But what the public sees is, it's a week's ceremony with a year of being careful. You receive a set of Orisha. You get a special reading during that time that gives you advice that you should be following for the rest of your life, basically, guidance and advice, and it's all there to help you.
So can you give an example, say, of something like those, like some kind of advice? I found one because you were on a podcast earlier and you talked about how, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, Eric, but
it's all right.
You don't eat pumpkin.
Well, that's a popular one.
Is it? Okay.
I mean, that's one thing people talk about a lot are the food
right. Yeah.
restrictions people are given, and I think in some ways it's kind of overblown. It's really it's there to help you,
right?
But pumpkin's a popular one.
Okay.
Some houses don't follow that, some do. So yeah.
So that's considered like part of this is that it's there to help you, right?
Right.
Amazing.
Yeah. The Orisha aren't going to get offended.
Right. Okay.
It's not about. There's no sin.
Got it.
It's part of this.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Stephen, something you talked about a little bit earlier was drumming and dancing. What part does this play in Santería Lucumi?
Originally, there was the Anya. Anya is a primordial feminine deity that resides inside of the drum. She's primordial. She is a major elderly deity having to do with creation and destruction. So when she walks into the house, everybody is to respect. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. A lot of people that know the history of a lot of this, they're going to realize that older and more powerful deities have to do with matriarchy. So a lot of people, it's kind of hearsay, monkey see, monkey do, as far as why certain things appear to be patriarchy and that male kind of run the show. But really, a lot of what people get confused with patriarchy has to do with a time where men were servants of these mothers. You know what I'm saying? And just like the saying says that there's only one king per kingdom, is the exact same thing if we were to think of a deity like Anya. Only men being able to touch her, and only men having to abstain and so forth before they go close to her. But basically, the point of working a deity like Anya is to either bring a certain ire or a blessing that you've been told is there for you, or to contract a certain osobu or a certain curse or a certain negative energy that you're trying to get rid of. She is said to be a womb that will open. And that's why when Anya is opened up and there's drumming going on and there's singing going on and Orisha is present, people are warned that you don't leave until everything has been sealed closed, because it's said that this big power energy portal is open, working magic while it's there, That's way the deeper end of stuff. You know what I'm saying? We can also go to a store and buy a shekere, buy a conga drum, and we can sing Orisha songs like that as well, and Orisha will come and participate. But the rules are not as structured and are not as strict as if you have Anya playing, Now with organizations like the Conjunto Folclórico Nacional, these public presentation groups, they were the first ones to have bata drums that didn't have Anya inside of them, And a lot of them that I learned from, they said that they didn't learn on drums that were not Anya. So in order for them to get close to Anya, they had to get initiated as little boys, and then they were to sit next to the drum, listen to the drum. If you were a dancer, it was the same thing, The elders were always in the front. They knew how to salute Anya, they knew how to dance, they knew how to sing, and they knew how to present and channel the Orisha. And the young ones were in the back watching them and learning, so that as you move forward with age and authority, by the time you're in the front of Anya, you know what to do, And then, of course, learning how to sing, if I'm 10 years old and people see that I have the asher, the gift to sing, a grand akbon may grab you and be like, whenever you want, come to sing with me,
Beautiful. I love it.
In the old days, there were no CDs.
No.
You had to sit and listen.
I hate to say it, Eric. There's no CDs now anymore either.
Those came and left.
All right, we've come full circle.
We've come full circle for sure. That's beautiful. I adore that. That's great. I think one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit, and I want to just put a bit more of a focus on it, is divination. So we've talked about one specifically. I'm wondering, gentlemen, if you're able to expand a little bit more on what role something like divination, or the oracle, as Stephen has called it, is used in Lucumi Santería.
So there's 3 kinds of divination.
3, okay.
Not including mediumship.
Okay.
3 mechanical ways. So we mentioned Ifa, which is the Babalao. They use cola nuts or palm nuts, sorry. And then you have Dilagun, which is what the Orishas use.
Okay.
Which are with cowrie shells. Both of those can get very, very deep.
Okay.
And you can do a lot with those. And then we use, in Lucumi, this is more of like a quicker kind of divination. We used coconut. We open up the coconut, get 4 pieces. In Africa, they use cola nuts, but it developed differently in Cuba due to things.
Right.
And we use those for most of our ceremonies. We use coconut because that way, we always check in to see how things are going. Or did we forget anything? Do you even want these things? We always double check as we go. Okay. To make sure we're not off track. But the role of divination is, we check in. Dilagun and Ifa are usually there to either find the remedy to a problem, or in some ceremonies to provide advice for the rest of your life, basically.
Okay.
So it depends on the context.
Yeah, I think that another thing that the Awo uses is opole, which is way more common than iking. But I think that using the word oracle, using the term something that delivers the message is also really important, because priesthoods like Anya, the drum, do you know how to speak the lingo of oral or vibration, sound? Do you know how to manipulate the womb of this drum to release or to contract the ashe that this person needs you to take care of today? Osai, different lineages of Osai have different types of divination as well. But the old school and the original Osai, the divination was the diviner would listen to the birds. And it was the birds or the mothers or the shapeshifters, the witches, that would speak to Osai, So it all depends on the priesthood that we're talking about.
For sure.
And Orisha, of course, by the way. Orisha is really important because the Orisha, some people confirm with Ifa, but I've had people that Ifa said, and they confirmed with the Orisha. In other words, they paid a very well-respected medium of an Orisha. They paid Anya to play. They paid a really good Akon to sing. They brought down to this Orisha. This Orisha came down and confirmed exactly what Ifa said on the mat.
And vice versa. I mean, all of it can happen. Yeah.
Nice. How one of my guests and it's probably Eric is wrestling with a cat right now.
Yes. that was Orisha.
Oh, I got it. Yeah. Nice. What are the from what I'm given to understand, some of the forms of divination are very complex, are they not? There's
very,
like 256 different machinations, or more than that.
There's 256 odus, but they also come in multiple orientations.
Okay.
Yeah, and all of this has to do with layers of what somebody can humanly retain.
Right.
I think that is really important to understand, that in places like Nigeria, there may be one person on the mat, but there's a group of people around you to kind of piggyback on the Odu, elaborate on it. We do that in certain situations here, especially if there are specific elders in the room that are well respected, or if there's specific types of mediums that are in the room. The person divining may ask, their opinion or anything, if they have anything that they want to tell this person.
And but even coconuts, I mean, it sounds funny. I'm like, I'm reading coconuts, but that there's a much smaller amount of signs with that, but it's just, it can be deceptively complicated. And Stephen will tell you too, it's like there's some people who can tell you everything from those 4 pieces of coconuts. So it isn't it could be as simple as a yes or no, right, but you can really drill down into what you need to know through that.
Yeah, and when you talk about, when you brought up 256, that's if people can get there.
Right.
Sometimes it's one throw,
right?
And like Eric is saying, it can be one throw of coconuts where there's 5 combinations. It can be one throw of 16 cowries where there's 17 divinations, or 17 options, and then there's throwing 16 cowries twice where everything turns into 256. But I'm just letting you know that there's kind of like a pattern where it gets as deep as you want it to get. It all depends on what you can handle, right, in regards to interpretation.
I was saying most people, when they receive Orisha, are taught how to read coconuts, because you should be able to talk to your Orishas.
Right.
Not everyone knows to read the shells.
Okay.
It's a very specialized thing, and it's I mean, I've been trying to learn it, and it's hard. It's a very complicated thing to learn. So
I was going to ask you if you know how to do it, Eric, or
I'm definitely not an expert. Steve is more of an expert in that than I am, for sure.
He knows enough, though. He knows enough to open up. and to seal it closed and to mark what needs to be done for the person, at least on the spot, you know? Sometimes, the situation is bigger than something that the diviner may be able to handle. And we may either need an elder or an awu, you know, a really well-versed awu ifa, depending on your lineage and if you guys deal with that. But it kind of depends on what you have access to.
I want to circle back to something that you mentioned to the answer of my last question. How does something like mediumship and or possession tie into the rituals of Lucumi Santeria?
That's hard to answer. So I think developing your mediumship helps you know what needs to be done.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen many cases where you just know what needs to be done and divination will confirm it. I mean, I think Steve and I have been with elders who just seems like they come up with things out of thin air, and it's correct, and it works. So it isn't all like confirmation with divination. So I think, you know, the goal really with mediumship is to, I guess, have that real time conversation with the spirits involved, so that you can again accomplish what you need to accomplish. Some people are, you know, masters at that.
Yeah, and also remember there's mediumship as far as Orisha.
I was just about to ask. Yeah, I was just
exactly. I was mentally thinking that, but I didn't say it.
There's Orisha that, you know, there's two different aspects. I'm really not going to get into it.
Sure.
There are certain forces that descend, and then there is Orisha, you know, the energies that really reside in the earth that rise via our feet. So it kind of depends on the energy. Regardless, Orisha should come with remedy, you know, Orisha should come with multiple confirmations. I think nowadays people don't know. But in the old days, you know, Orisha really had to prove themselves before they earned communal respect, you know. There's that type of mediumship as well.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is it's not out of line to expect your Orisha to actually work. You know, because I think sometimes people think that you just receive this Orisha and, you know, and then all of a sudden you just have everything open. And, you know, sometimes it has to be developed. You know, it's not like a genie in a bottle where it just automatically performs on command, you know, or a vending machine. That's the other analogy I use. They're not vending machines.
Sure. Yeah. Which, I mean, a lot of people these days, that's kind of what they want. They want the vending machine spirituality, but Lucumi doesn't have that for you, huh?
Well, I would argue no religion has that. I mean, we're not unique in that at all.
No.
To me, I think what Lucumi offers is an accessible way of accessing that sort of old world spirituality that people are trying to reconstruct through books today, you know, in the West.
Something that I think we at least have to bring it up at some point, something like sacrifices of animals and offerings. What part does this play in Lucumi Santeria? Because at some point there was a lawsuit somewhere in the United States where it was one of those things where they had to fight to be able to do these animal sacrifices and offerings. Can either of you touch on this? And if you don't want to, don't.
Well, we got to go back to Africa. You know, it's easy to go back to Cuba. It's easy to go back to Brazil and really see how important it is to eat. That's really step one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
These are places where meat is a privilege, you know? And so when I was crowned in Cuba, the party that was given for me to get presented to Anya and the drum literally fed the whole community. You know, the animals that were used to birth my Orisha fed everybody. Anything that we do not eat from animals that we offer is cooked and it's offered to the Orisha. So if you think about how things have always been, where the problems comes in is what people are doing today.
Right.
You know, even in places here like Miami, New York, where, you know, people prefer literally to go buy a whole bunch of slabs of chicken from the supermarket instead of putting in the work, cleaning, going out and choosing the right chickens so that, everybody can eat them, So these are communities today where people are sacrificing and not necessarily doing what they're supposed to be doing with the animals, And if you don't eat the animals, it's really important that you always divine and you ask where the animals are supposed to go in order to return back to nature so that nature, Onile, can always keep bringing us more and more and more. And to take a life of anything, our rites that go into taking life is way more complex than the slaughterhouse of cows and chickens from these meat companies, where you're eating the energy of the location where this animal was killed. That's what we believe, versus us, where we pray over these animals, we sing over these animals, and we always divine if everything was done correctly, if a life was taken.
I think for outsiders, it's easy to sensationalize things.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And, the reality is that, we don't do it as much as people think. And it should be a last resort. It's not something that I take lightly, and I don't think people should take lightly. And it should always be done with respect. If I had my personal Eric way, I wouldn't do it. It's not something you should be looking. I don't think this should be fun. It's just something that's necessary. I eat meat,
right?
And I think what we do is much more respectful and humane than what we do. What happens in factory farming? Really, you mentioned that court case, and I was a newbie in the religion when that happened, and before that, things were hidden more. The Lucumi community was much tighter knit, I think, in some ways, because people had to be secretive. After that court case, things became a little bit more public. By the way, what won the court case had a lot to do with the similarity of our practices with kosher practices.
Okay.
Because mechanically speaking, if you outlaw animal sacrifice, you're actually outlawing kosher and halal practices.
Right. Yeah.
Because you have qualified religious, authority, killing an animal in a respectful, ceremonial manner, and and I think there's a lot of similarities with that,
for sure.
But no, it shouldn't. This is not a bloodthirsty religion by any means. Sometimes it has to be done, but it isn't done all the time.
Yeah,
it's much more common to be offering some kind of food or plants or something.
For sure. Things have come a long way since the 90s for old timers like ourselves, the three of us. But for a period of time, 70s, 80s, that was basically, when you look at articles, that was basically what everybody concentrated on. Like it almost like,
good,
yeah,
makes good print.
Right. Yeah.
But also, the notion of the word sacrifice, there's a word that we use often, which is abo, and abo means sacrifice. Mm-hmm. But in practice, what that means is abo could be a candle. It can be, plants. It could be a prayer. It could be cooking something for them. Abo can be many, many things.
Definitely.
Yeah. And in our practice, things like, because we have a lot of vegetarians that have issues with what we do. And for us, the priesthood of Osan that works with herbs and that works with plants, the plant is sacred, like very sacred, And if you're going to pluck from plants or knock down plants or pluck plants, there are ebos and processes that go through that, They go to that, and the same thing if you're going to eat any of the stuff as well,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Definitely. I want to switch gears here because it is said that back in Cuba that one of the main ways in which non-practitioners of Lucumi Santeria would approach, and these are two words that we haven't used too much, Santeros and Santeras. I'm probably not saying that correctly, but it was to help them with some kind of like an ailment, some kind of like healing. That's how a lot of people would first come across Lucumi Santeria. So how does healing enter into Lucumi Santeria?
The two words are Santero and Santera, which
there
are
we go.
Either it's an Orisha, it's an initiated person in a religion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as Stephen mentioned earlier, that a lot of people come into this religion because they have some sort of a problem.
Right.
And that could be health or it could be something else. And that's one of the roles of divination, is to find the cure, is to find the way to fix whatever the problem is. And that's not true of just Cuba. That's true today. Most people don't search for religion when everything is amazing.
Right.
For us, it's really, it's a very modern day thing where it's a fad. The fad is the new age thing. I'm sure it undergoes waves when it is. I can listen to 70s salsa music and they were going through the phase, you know what I'm saying? Where they were boasting about it. They were, in their lyrics, they were fighting each other on it.
Right.
But really, this has always been, the most respected Orishas and Babalochas and Babalaos out there, earned their title through their miracles. What it is that they either what it is that they did to mark remedy, or how it was that they brought everybody together to collectively, with consciousness heal. Because a lot of priests are very well at that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Maternal and paternal people that have families and communities where this person, they pray together, and with that they move mountains. But yeah, old days, definitely. You gain your title and your respect either with the amount of work that you put in or the miracles.
And also, it's stories that I've heard about the old days that, you weren't necessarily, you didn't have as much of this phenomena where everybody had to be initiated and you felt like, and you just wanted to do that so you could have the title or whatever. It was usually prescribed.
Got it.
And it wasn't always something that people wanted either. I mean, it was something that was taken very seriously. And the community would often pool their resources to make that happen. And there are some cases where that still can happen, but it isn't, this isn't just, take out a loan and get your initiation done. It wasn't always that way.
Right.
Things change,
Mm-hmm. Something that I find very interesting, we'll use you as an example, Eric. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, is you are Lucumi Santeria, but you are also a practicing magician. How do the two meet? Like you have this knowledge of, I'm going to use huge air quotes, Western ritual magic. You also have Lucumi Santeria. Is there at any point, do they touch? Or do you keep them completely separate? How does magic enter? How is magic viewed within Lucumi Santeria and the way that you're more westernized European ritual magic? Is there any kind of linking between the two? Anything that they share?
I don't mix ever. The most that I will mix is I like to light a candle for my spirits before I do an astrology reading.
Okay.
But I don't employ Orishas with any other kind of magic that I would do. Mm-hmm. My day-to-day really is Lucumi.
Okay.
That's my main thing anyway. But if I'm going to do something with astrological magic, I don't bring in Orishas ever.
Okay.
And I might light a candle for my spirits separately. But Lucumi doesn't look down upon that necessarily. And in fact, some people can be prescribed things like, maybe they need to spend a little time meditating in a Buddhist temple, or maybe they need to, spend some time visiting a church or whatever. I was told to study astrology. Again, the goal of all of this is to help you,
right,
and to help you achieve what you need to achieve. And sometimes, there's no jealousy here. The Orisha don't say that, no, thou shalt not bring other gods before me. But I've literally known people told those things. And I knew of a Muslim who was initiated way back when, and there was no conflict. I mean, he still did his prayers. And
yeah, I think with me it's the same thing, that all the practices that I practice coincidentally align with what I'm doing. Cool. What that we all want. So that includes me as a Freemason, me as a Valero, the Congolese rites, my studies in quantum physics, law of attraction, and all that kind of stuff. They all tie in and they all piggyback with each other, and they're all for progress, definitely.
And I think the compatibilities, as Stephen was kind of saying too, is I think compatibility is something. I would have, and this is not to denigrate anybody's practice, but I would personally have a hard time working with Santa Muerte. That it deals with a spirit of death, and that's in Lucumi is a major osogbo. That's like an affliction or something. Oh. And so that's something that I would not be as compatible for me. I'm not going to say other people should not do that.
Right.
So yeah, I do try to maintain a certain compatibility. So doing astrological magic is in alignment with this. I mean, it does not contradict anything that I'm doing with Lucumi. But I also don't curse people. That's another thing too. So I try to keep everything towards bettering myself and other people, and and the students that I have, helping them out.
Right.
I don't really deal with anything that is against that.
Got it. I have to ask Stephen, what are some of the most common misconceptions that you've come across regarding Lucumi?
That animals are killed for no reason.
Okay. Yeah.
People don't know, they have no clue that this comes from a time where, we kill to eat. And we still do. That's where money goes. That's why stuff is so expensive. People need to know how to clean animals, open them up. Who's going to season? Who's going to be all night cooking? The whole community comes together to crown people. Other things, witchcraft. This is a set of rites along with Balo. I don't care how people think that they can manipulate it. These are all rites where anything that you release, you're eventually going to contract. I mean, that's the logical science of what these practices teach, regardless. So you give what you expect to receive. Now, there's Eshu. There's a deity that can totally change what you think is a blessing on somebody and turn it as a prank or as a trick where other people may see it as a curse, So in these kind of cases, it's important that you do things wholeheartedly, consciously, do what you can, but always remember that anything that you can do can get totally twisted. Eshu has a feast being a trickster like that, Eshu and the devil, there's a really big fad right now about Eshu is not the devil. A bunch of people kind of like talking about this, and I'm like, Eshu is so beyond the devil, you have no clue what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Eshu is basically Oyigi Yigi. When the first stone was split in the creation process, that's when Eshu was born. The first aspect of duality is Eshu. And anywhere that there is change or where there are portals where you can go into somewhere else or where one becomes two, you have Eshu, So imagine how Eshu looks at something like the devil versus, its opposition. He's chuckling at both aspects of himself,
And I can also add that online, there's a lot of people who do not know what we do in ceremonies saying things that, like, Lucumi is a corrupted, westernized version of African religion, because it's Catholicized. That's a pretty popular one.
Right.
And these people have no idea what we're doing in the room. Right. When we do a ceremony. And I was kicked out of a out of a group on Facebook arguing with the moderator because he literally told me that his argument was that he had 10 books on the subject and he was quoting those, but he had never been inside of a room.
Right.
I said it earlier, there were no saint statues happening.
Right.
It's very African once we're actually doing the ceremonies.
Right. I've heard one of the misconceptions, and maybe you guys can jump on this a little bit, is that like Santeria Lucumi is like a softer version of Palo.
They're different religions.
Yeah.
Two totally different things from two totally different groups of people from two very, very, very different parts of Africa. There are things that will always be similar as you travel through Africa. There's ancestral homage. There's nature, the power of nature. There is self-development, procreation, being a form of riches. All of these things you're going to find all over the place. You know what I'm saying? Right. But as far as the power of the psyche, the human psyche, I don't know of anything that can get with something like the Congolese stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, some of this also has to do with books that have come out. And there's a little bit of, in the occult community, there's a little bit of attraction to Palo because they think it's darker.
Yeah.
It's a little more goth. And it's completely mistaken. And, there's a lot of, both religions can accomplish the full spectrum. So you can't, if you could do dark, I mean, what is dark? I guess people, I think, are thinking of, I don't know, cursing, or I don't know what they're thinking, but, you could do many of the same things in Santeria as well. It isn't like we're just, sitting on a cloud and pontificating about, the nature of the universe.
Right.
We're trying to get things done. Both religions are trying to get things done. They, nowadays in Cuba, or in the Aura, people practice both.
Right.
And some people prefer one over the other. I personally am not as much of a Apollo person, although I'm initiated in it. And Stephen's more, I think you do both more together. I would say.
Yeah. And I think it's, the thing about Palo, especially when you're dealing with Afro-Cubans, it's very powerful and it's very neutral. Again, I will go back to all of these practices. Everything that you release is eventually what you contract, but just like in Orisha, right? It's working with Egu, or working with the white table of spiritism, you may get things a lot quicker than asking the Orisha to give it to you. Because remember, the Orisha are there to keep you in alignment with your destiny. And that's really important in regards to divination, that some people go to the divination tray because they want certain things done. But you're only going to be in Ire, you're only going to be in alignment with your destiny, or you're only going to be happy with the results if you're in alignment with your destiny, And sometimes being in alignment with your destiny may mean that you're supposed to be sick right now, or you're supposed to be undergoing the struggle that you're undergoing right now. And other people go over there expecting to hear a lottery number. And instead, they find out that they're in Osogbo. There's a serious issue going on with their health, and they have to go figure out what's going on over there, So I'm bringing all of that up just to say that things like Palo and ancestral work, you may see results a lot quicker, and you may see spirits bending backwards to make deals with you. But I think at the end of the day, all of these practices always have to do with everything coming back,
And the thing is, individual practice is going to be different because, like I said, I'm more attracted to Lucumi personally. That's kind of my, bread and butter. And that's me. But when you start getting into like what is softer or harder, or what is darker and what is light, it is absolutely, that's just people who don't know.
Right.
As simple as all that. Because you can accomplish similar things with both religions. It depends on what your what your alignment is. What can you personally do? What is your preference and things like that.
For sure. I have to ask, can anybody join Santeria, Lucumi? I know a lot of white people are are in Lucumi Santeria. I know gay people. Is it open to basically everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Most aspect, yes. Again, that kind of depends on the elders that you're under.
Mm-hmm.
There are elders that don't know much about Yoruba history. I do make it clear whenever I need to make it clear, or when people need to understand that this comes from a culture of procreation is the most important thing in Yoruba culture, period. So the reason why it works in Lucumi with people of different preferences in regards to their attraction, I think, is because when we talk about procreation in the Lucumi rites, we're talking about godchildren. We're talking about a spiritual family, So there are very well-respected gay couples that have very big communities,
Mm-hmm.
So for us, that is the same wealth as giving birth to a family of 20 kids, which is common in Yoruba culture. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Literally, it's riches.
And same thing with race. I mean, it's not, the Lucumi has been open racially for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Going all the way back to Cuba. I mean, I'm white, and one thing I've never had anyone tell me who's actually a priest in this religion, who's initiated. I've never had one person tell me that I shouldn't be there.
Huh.
The only people who've said I shouldn't be there are not in the religion. That's as simple as that. I've known respected elders. I've known people who are fairly well known in the religion, and not one person has ever questioned my involvement. And I'm not the only white person by a long shot.
No.
But it's never been. The only thing that was unusual with me is my Spanish is horrible.
But Eric, you translate Latin. How is this possible?
I probably know more Yoruban words than I know Spanish.
Oh, wow.
Nowadays.
So I just have to ask the last question here, gents, is personal opinions, but what makes Lucumi so appealing to you, and what do you think it has to offer to others? And I'll ask you first, Eric.
I don't proselytize,
No.
But Lucumi made me what I am. I did not come into this looking for it. I didn't even hear of it.
Okay.
Before. When I met my teacher, I was looking for someone who could teach me, Golden Dawn-esque ceremonial magic, and I found him instead.
Nice. Good.
But I learned very quickly that it's not the easiest path by a long shot, but it is a very effective one. And there are days that I tell myself this is so difficult and why am I doing this? But then at the same time, it's made me who I am, and it is effective, demonstrably so. So I think what it has to offer people is that, if you find the right teachers, you can have concrete answers to questions that you have, and and problems that you have, and they may not happen overnight. But over time it will happen. And I personally like having the structure of having a teacher. I don't trust my own wiles all the time. I think it gets a lot of people into trouble. So it's nice to have a community of people who can call you on your proverbial bullshit.
Right. Love it. Stephen, how about yourself?
I was brought into this at a very young age.
Okay.
it didn't seem like I was young back then. I was 13. Some people are born into this, like my wife. But I understood so much culturally, I'm Puerto Rican. Puerto Ricans have always respected, quote unquote, Santería and the Afro-Cuban way of doing things. But Puerto Rico also had its own way, which really has a lot to do with your gifts. So different communities and different houses have their own ways of doing things, but they're very well respected because of their results. So it's different the way we work things in Puerto Rico, but I didn't live in Puerto Rico for a long time. So for me, it was, the outside looking in. I think Robert Ferris Thompson, his exhibit, Face of the Gods, was the first time where I actually kind of saw this a little bit more organized. Then the shrines of my grandmother's made sense, my uncle's shrine. And I just dove in, after my first reading. I have not stopped studying since that day. I'm 20 years into Ocha crowned, but I've been studying since I was 13, 24 hours a day. There are so many aspects to this practice, like I said, and I play drums, I sing, I divine, I'm training as an oriate. So all these different titles, obviously a jack of all trades cannot be a master of any of them. Now that I moved from Seattle over here to Miami, I have to make choices. I hate it. I have to narrow down and I have to figure out, like, realistically, what is it that I'm going to do 100%. But there's a place for everybody in this, especially people that are drawn to it. Some people become sowers, some people become cooks, some people become diviners, some people become mediums. It all depends on what draws you at the end of the day, but everybody's welcome. I think that different iles work in different ways. I will say that, there are even iles of activists, African Americans. There are iles that are all gay. There are iles that are all a bunch of people that are under Inaworifa. It all kind of depends on what it is that you're looking for. To be picky, to choose, to pace yourself. Luckily, Eric and I are both, we're philosophers. We really get into this stuff to understand what's going on. But obviously, the biggest defect of a philosopher is, how often you get your hands dirty and actually put this to work, A lot of the philosophers that I know, when I see them in ceremony, I'm like, ooh, okay. But that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here in Miami, to actually put my knowledge to work. And it's a whole different chapter in my life.
That's wonderful. Oh, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I don't know if you have anything out there publicly, or if people can find, if you have a website or anything like that. Is what's happening? Or are you just good to be boots on the ground?
Yeah, I'm just right now I'm working on a website.
Nice.
Stephen Cherena is what most people can reach me under. Facebook. Obikinkenyo, my name in Ocha. My Instagram, I have a lot of stuff there where people can go to. I reach a lot of people that way, so.
Stephen's very present online.
Oh, yes. How about yourself, Eric? Where can people find your stuff? Are you still doing astrological readings? Or are you still,
yeah, that's how I put myself out there. I'm not putting myself out there as, as a godparent.
Right.
But yeah, my website, ericpurdue.com, and I have my astrology readings on there, and this one book called 3 Books of Occult Philosophy. And
oh, tell us more. No, just kidding.
I already did.
Oh, that's true. Yes, you did. Wonderful. Gentlemen, I have one final question before we log off, but what would you say would be the best for somebody who's just listening in the middle of nowhere, let's say in, I don't know, Nebraska, and they say, like, this sounds interesting to me. What advice would you give them to take the first steps to try and learn a little bit more?
I'm gonna leave that to Stephen.
I think for me, the most important thing is, first of all, take a look at it from all aspects. I love Lucumi, but if it weren't for people like Falokun Fatumbi, people like John Turpin, my Babalao, Robert Ferris Thompson, these people that traveled all over the place, thank goodness that that's who I started with, because I had no clue that there was so much division in this until I began walking it, but to really understand the philosophy of the practice, the Middle Passage was a bumpy ride, but it made it. Our ancestors could have jumped the boat, but no, the ancestors struggled and strived to keep it going. So I think that it's important to look at all the different aspects, all the different branches of this, but there are philosophical structures that go back to creation and the Yoruba belief system that really should not change regardless of where the practice goes, And there's a lot of people that don't know those. And they would probably be surprised if they were to hear some of them. So,
Right.
Look and see what this is really, really, really about. Even if you're initiated, and it's 20 years later, like, take a little bit of time because it'll strengthen you a lot more.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been wonderful. I've learned tons. My goodness. I was saying to Eric before the microphone turned off, I was like, I think I know enough about this. And then I started doing a bit of research. It's like, I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. I have no clue. I know 3 Orisha. Like that's silliness. So
how do you think I feel?
Right. I will have the links where to find Stephen as well as Eric. Those will be up at whatmagicisthis.com. The webpage for this episode also there. There's going to be some show notes for this episode. Not a ton of them. Unfortunately, there's going to be some. There's going to be some books to point you at, but there's not a lot of them. So head to whatmagicisthis.com for some of those book recommendations. So, do you think that I'm doing something somewhat important here at What Magic Is This, and you would like to support in some way? Well, I have 3 ways of supporting for you to try, should you want to. I mean, I think I'm doing something kind of cool, and I hope you do as well. But the best way of showing your support is through Patreon. That is patreon.com/whatmagicisthis, or head to whatmagicisthis.com and find any one of the Patreon links there. It is only $7 a month. It's like a whole different podcast. I am now producing as much stuff on the Patreon as I am for this regular podcast. And $7 a month, access to videos. I've got full audio episodes. It gives you access to a Discord server that is just lovely and very supportive, and there's some great things happening there. I can't share too many details right now, but there's going to be some really interesting stuff that the Patreon supporters are doing, and they're just the best, I have to say. So huge shout out to all of my Patreon supporters. You guys just astound and amaze me so often. It's really quite wonderful. I never expected it. Anyways, I love each and every one of you, but I would love to see you, the casual listener of What Magic Is This. Come on, join us on the Patreon, $7 a month. It's great. It's pretty much, I think, my best work. I love these interviews, and I love the kind of like the tutor student stuff that I do sometimes here at What Magic Is This on the main podcast, but I think I do my best work on the Patreon. I think it's the most interesting. I get a little bit experimental. That's pretty much my favorite stuff. So $7 a month, that's the best way of supporting me. That's not very much. That's nothing. That's the cost of, I don't know, parking in a major city for 30 minutes. I'm just going to say that. For the amount of time that it takes to watch a TV show, you can park your car in a major city for $7, which is the cost of my Patreon. I really screwed that up. I didn't explain that very properly. Anyways, I'm moving on. Second way of supporting the show is through PayPal. Head to What Magic Is This, click any number of the PayPal links. You all know what the PayPal logo looks like. Those 2 Ps, click them, and you can donate $5, $10, $20, $200,000. Any amount helps. It goes right back into keeping this podcast alive for hosting fees and plugins for my editing software and all of that stuff. The prices on these things, they just keep going up. It's insanity, and I need to pay for that. And usually I pay right out of my pocket, but if you donate through the PayPal, it goes right back into helping me with those costs. Keeps the fires on, keeps the furnace stoked, and yes, any amount would be helpful. But yes, head to whatmagicisthis.com, find the PayPal me links there, and just click that, and any amount would be appreciated. The third way of supporting What Magic Is This is to grab some merch. Head to whatmagicisthis.com, find the merch on the menu there up at the top right, and you can find t-shirts, notebooks, those are my favorite, mugs, stickers, hoodies, tote bags, tapestries, pillows. You can have a What Magic Is This pillow fight. Just don't throw it at anybody's eyes, right? Because you only get one set of eyes. But please grab some merch if you so desire. It's always awesome seeing people wearing those out in public when they send me pictures on Instagram or something like that. It's very cool. I don't get a ton of money from those. I get like cents from those things. But it's always appreciated. It's really cool to see people wearing my stuff. I have a lot of my own stuff. But yes, that is another way of supporting What Magic Is This. But the way I would really like to see your support, the best way of supporting me, besides telling your friends or leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, the best way of showing your support is through Patreon. Patreon.com/whatmagicisthis, or head to whatmagicisthis.com and find any number of the support me on Patreon buttons there. Click on them. $7 a month. That's it. That's the best way of supporting. All of these things, show notes, book recommendations, links to Eric and Steven's work, and places to find them on the interwebs. All of that stuff. whatmagicisthis.com. We'll see you there. Gentlemen, Steven, Eric, thank you so much for joining me. And maybe one of these days we'll catch up with either one of you or both of you again a little bit further on down the line. But I just want to thank you so much for giving myself and the listeners of What Magic Is This your knowledge. And I hope if I was to ask you both to come on the show at some point, you'd be able to say yes.
Definitely. Thank you as well. And
thank you.
Don't hesitate, however, referring people to me whenever need be.
Sounds good. Wonderful.
I usually do.
Nice. And I swear one of these days, Eric, we'll have you on the show just by yourself. But for the two appearances that you've had, you've always had somebody else to talk to. But one of these days we'll get you on.
You have to develop the trust. I get it.
That's right. Everybody, that is Lucumi, Santería, and just scratch the surface with this one. We'll have some interesting show notes and some places for you to go. But that's the show. I hope everybody got something from it. And yes, come on back to What Magic Is This. We'll talk about more of this wonderful, austere, lovely, beautiful, and sometimes messy stuff that we call magic, mysticism, the occult, and the esoteric. Until then, I want each and every one of you to stay healthy, to stay happy, and to stay luminous. Until then, each and every one of you, goodbye. Ta-ta for now. Bye-bye.
Hanya hanya podung elegba hwe. Hanya hanya fae.